Okay, for this module, we are going to be talking about environments, spaces, and materials. I first want to start out by highlighting the difference in verbiage as we move through this module. You will read and hear the terms spaces and environments, and these are not interchangeable, although sometimes authors will use them as such. I want you to know that they are not mutually exclusive, but they do have different definitions. So for the sake of this module and this course, we will talk about space as the physical, unchanging features of the place in which one lives and works with children. So this is the floor plan, the doors, the windows, access to outdoors, the trees that are outside, the light fixtures, things that are relatively unchanging. And then we will talk about the environment. And this is the way a physical space that we just talked about is dressed up, the way it's lived in, the way it's defined and redefined over time. This holds our nuances, our memories. Environments hold feelings. So I like to give the concrete example of house shopping. Let's say you visit one street and there's two houses on the same street that you're looking to buy. Usually on the same street, houses will have similar floor plans. So for the sake of this example, let's say you walk into both houses and they both have the same space, the same floor plan, the same windows, the same indoor space and outdoor space. But what you notice and what makes you feel something is actually the environment. So how that space is dressed up, how it's lived in, what does the furniture look like? How does it smell when you walk in? Are there light fixtures? Are there curtains? It's something that is defined and redefined like a style. So you'll notice that everybody's style is different when you go into a house. And as such, your style should be different when you go into an early childhood center. So while a space is physical and unchanging, it can have similar floor plans, the environment is ever changing and it is always redefining itself, changing, evolving. Some important questions to ask as practitioners is, why do environments matter? We should ask ourselves, why do these carefully planned environments matter? Why do they matter to us, and why do they matter to children? And as you read through this module, you will find out more. We should always ask ourselves, how do these spaces and environments make us feel? And how do they make the children feel? Like I just gave you that example of going into the two houses. You can go into two very similar spaces and feel very different in each space. So how does your space and environment make a child feel? We also want to be asking ourselves, what does an early childhood environment say about the educators who work there? What does your environment say about you? And what does it say about your center and what it values? So it's important that when you're evaluating your space and your environment, what message are you conveying? A few great quotes that I always like to give in this thought-provoking process as we really start down this journey of thinking about environments and spaces and their roles in emergent curriculum. I like to, let's see, let me go to this next one actually. Okay, I want to make sure I have the right quotes in the right order here. So the first one, in Environments at a Glance: an environment is a living, changing system. More than the physical space, it includes the way time is structured and the roles we are expected to play. It conditions how we feel, think, and behave, and it dramatically affects the quality of our lives. The environment either works for us or against us as we conduct our lives. And while this is a blanket quote about environments in our lives, I really would like you to relate it to the early childhood experience. And then the next quote from The 100 Languages of Children, written by Loris Malaguzzi, and he is the founder of the Reggio Emilia philosophy. He says, "We all tend to notice the environment and read its messages or meanings on the basis of personal experiences and the knowledge we have acquired about child development." I want you to think, before I go into the next slides, which are pictures of different environments, I want you to think about messy environments. Okay, so let's pretend you walked into that house and there's clothes all over the floor and there's dishes in the sink and old rotten food everywhere. I need you to understand something about messy environments. So first of all, when a person is put into a messy environment, especially children or even an adult with anxiety, it triggers the release of a stress hormone called cortisol. Basically, our brains are pattern seekers, so we want to make sense of our environment. When things are messy, we don't know what to do in those environments, and we definitely don't know how to clean up those environments. Messy environments bombard our minds with excessive stimuli, and this causes our senses to work overtime. These messy environments distract children by drawing their attention away from what they should be focusing on. It makes it more difficult for children to relax, both physically and mentally. It inhibits creativity and productivity by cluttering the open spaces. These open spaces are meant to allow children to think and problem solve. And then I like to point out that with all of this in mind, messy environments dramatically impact behavior. So what you will notice is children acting erratically or acting like they don't know where something is to be put away. Well, sometimes they don't. It's not that they're manipulating, it's that the environment doesn't make it easy for them to understand what to do and where things go. I have included a pretty funny video that I will not show for the sake of time, but it's incumbent upon you after you read this or watch this lecture to watch this small video. And it's a little clip from Toy Story 2. And if any of you are familiar with this movie, you will know that this is the scene where all of the toys have been donated to a daycare, and they're sitting in the daycare and they're waiting for children to come in, and they are so excited. And when the children come in, they make an absolute mess of the environment. And Toy Story does a fantastic job of capturing that chaos and that stress. And even watching it causes me to produce cortisol. So watch that and get a sense for how that makes you feel. And so now what we're going to do, we're going to look at the following slides, and I want you to start thinking about how these environments make you feel. I want you to start asking yourself different questions as I go through these pictures, and I'm going to go through them fast because this is being recorded, but you have access to this PowerPoint to look at on your own time. But I want you to start reflecting and thinking about what spaces make up your classroom. Are they aesthetically legible? So like I just talked about for the sake of this course, I coined the term aesthetically legible, meaning can a child see what the intent of your space is? Do they feel good? Do they know what is supposed to be done at the block center? Do they know what is supposed to be done at the art area? So how do you set up your spaces so they are beautiful and they are nice environments to look at? I also want you to ask yourself what options are presented to children in each part of the space, and how can students engage with the materials in the pictures that you're seeing? Is it welcoming? Are there soft spaces? How is the lighting? Is it cluttered? Is there enough room to move around? How many children can be in those spaces? And then most importantly, how does the spaces that you're about to see reflect the values of your school and how you view children, or in this case, the view of the schools that I'm about to show you. So I'm going to go through them pretty fast. The mess, the clutter, it's not inviting. There's a lot of bright colors here. While you might think it's clean, it is very overstimulating. And remember, the more sensory stimulation children receive, the higher production of cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and it is not good for children. These primary colors are obnoxious. I would not want to spend 8 hours a day in this environment. I would be on sensory overload. Again, thinking about the mess, thinking about clutter, thinking about lighting and soft spaces. Think about how you would feel and how a child would feel in this space. I also want you to note the amount of plastic and primary colors that are used. And I want you to think about the juxtaposition in a few minutes when I show you pictures of really wonderfully inviting environments and spaces. This looks like my daughter's playroom. This is a pretty legible space, but there's a lot of clutter. It's a small space, a lot crammed in, and the colors are pretty bright. Sorry, you'll notice that some pictures are repeats here. Okay, so like I just talked about creating an aesthetically legible space, as you look through these pictures, I want you to be thinking about your own spaces as you work with children. And I want you to consider some things as you're making them legible. So if you don't use it, you don't want it, or you don't need it, get rid of it. You don't have to have every single material out on display like this picture, okay? There is something to be said for hiding it away in a closet somewhere where nobody can see. Things that are used every day or frequently, put those out for easy access. Store everything else in closets or outdoors so it's out of sight. Remove broken materials, toys, and supplies. Remember, we talked about what your environment and space conveys about a child. So if you have a bunch of broken materials, that doesn't mean you respect the child. You think it's okay that they can play with those types of things. You should be using as many natural materials as possible, not plastic. I know plastic is cheap, but if you're looking for a cheap alternative, go to IKEA. They have plenty of materials available that are natural and not plastic, and it's fairly or relatively cheap. And always, when possible, use soft or natural lighting. Our brains actually develop better under those type of conditions. Okay, and I want you to consider all of the same things now as you go through the next few pictures and look at these environments and spaces. Note the natural materials, the lighting. It's aesthetically legible. There's plants. That's important. Lighting, the soft lighting whenever you can. This is what we call a provocation for play using loose parts. This is great. It's a wide open, usable space. There are no partitions or cubbies, which is so great. This is another example of space that is wide open but partitioned. But notice how open everything is. There's a lot of light, a lot of space, and the shelving units open both ways, which I think is really great. Here's an example of an outdoor space. Another indoor space. Look how they painted the brick, so it's a little more inviting. I want to draw your attention to this. I think this is super important to note, is that these materials are real. Those are real ceramic cups or china, and then there are glass tiles. So there's real materials that we are allowing children to use. Here's a music wall, natural materials, real materials you'd find in a kitchen. Here's a great example of an outdoor kitchen. And notice it's real things, real utensils. It's important to note that teachers are on a small budget, so you definitely do not have to go out and buy these things yourself. You can find these things at a dollar store. You can find them at a thrift store, or ask parents for donations of old items. I like to point this out as an aesthetically legible space because everything is color coded. So when you're asking children to pick up after themselves and put things away, this is a really nice way to not only teach colors and display the rainbow, but it is so legible that the children know where things go and where they need to be returned. This is a great open space. Again, use of natural materials, great lighting, plants. I'll go through some of these. Natural baskets, wood. I want you to also think about the environment as an invitation. The teacher's contribution to play always begins with the physical environment, with stage setting. Teachers of young children begin by provisioning the environment with accessible, open-ended materials and tools, and an inviting aesthetic. In turn, the environment invites young children to action. We actually call these in the field loose parts. So loose parts in an environment is the presence of loose parts, which can be combined by imaginative children or teachers as the need arises, contributes greatly to the potential richness and complexity of any learning environment. Here are some examples of loose parts. Again, I'm going to go through these quickly, but you have access to them in our Canvas module.